This lesson is on creating a little bit of a dungeon game. I'm going to use a dungeon. You could have a house and you could have chores like the dishes to do or vacuuming or whatever before you could leave the house. You can do a ton of things. Like I said, I'm going to do a little dungeon. So here's the great part of this. You'll notice the screen I have up is our old maze game. Because if you write code and you've got good code, you can reuse that code. I want to reuse my button code down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with my maze game, and I'm going to save as a copy. So it saved it. It called it maze copy. I'm going to actually call this dungeon game. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of a bunch of stuff. What I really wanted was all of this. I really wanted all the key movements. I didn't need anything else. I don't need any of these sprites or any of that stuff. Don't delete them yet. You'll be unhappy. But I don't need all of this. So throwing it away. Okay. So I'm going to keep that there. But instead of it being the cat sprite, although it could be, I'm going to make mine some kind of a human. So I'm going to choose a sprite and I'm going to put people. And I want somebody who might be hanging out in a cave or a dungeon. I almost picked him. How about the centaur? He looks like he belongs in a cave. We'll use the centaur. So there's the centaur. He's up there. Now, he is going to be my main sprite. But I can go back to that sprite one, the cat, and all that code I have, I can just pull it and drop it right on top of the centaur. And now the centaur has all that code. And now I can delete my cat and my mouse and my sprite 2 that I have there. I can go into my stage, go into my stage backdrops, and I can delete that. It won't let you delete it, so you have none. So I got to get a new backdrop. I'm going to get a new backdrop. Actually, I can write over this one. I'm good with this because I'm just going to put mine as a big black square. So I'm going to turn my whole backdrop black, following the thing before. I copied the stuff thing. If it's black, you can't touch it. So I'm just going to make one very large black square. We'll stretch that out so it fills it completely. And now I've got one big black square. Hello, Mr. Centaur on the big black square. So the way I'm going to show my dungeon is I'm going to paint. So I'm going to put my painter, but I'm going to need it very wide. I'm going to put 100 up here. So my brush will be 100 wide. And my fill here, now I'm going to change my color. Oh, got to bring my brightness up. I'm going to change my color. I'm going to go in. That looks somewhere. There we go. There's a nice brown. So I like the feel of brown. It feels kind of like a cave. And I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to wander my cave, go slow, all the way down here, and I'm going to run it off the edge here. Then I'm going to run a couple little side trips. So here'll be my first side trip. Here's my second one. Okay, so now I've got a good-looking cave. So my centaur is going to start on the cave. He's going to start out way in the back of the cave because he's been put there by a dragon. Mean dragon. Mr. Centaur is... Whoops. Come on, sorry. Mr. Centaur is really too big for his environment. So let's change Mr. Centaur. Let's start at 20 and see if he's still too big. Mr. Centaur, he kind of fits-ish. But remember, we're going to have it anytime it hits the black line, it's going to cause a problem. So Mr. Centaur is way too big. Let's take him all the way down to 10. Oops. 10. Now Mr. Centaur is pretty small, but again, keep that in focus that when I explode this screen, Mr. Centaur is big enough to see. Okay, so Mr. Centaur's up here. That is the position I want him to start at all the time. So I'm going to start doing some events. So here's my event. When the green flag is pressed, I want Mr. Centaur to go there because we're going to move him around. And we remember that from before, that's motion, and go to that X and a Y. Now it'll put them there. As part of my program, following the other one, I'm actually going to, when Mr. Centaur leaves the cave, I'm not going to see him anymore. I'm going to hide him. So the first thing I need to do is go to looks and show him. So now I've showed him. And I'm going to play a sound. I'm gonna play. That'll work. He snorts. That's his deal. He snorts. So I'm gonna play snort, and I don't really need so much sound as much as the other. Now let's go on to Mr. Centaur. We're still focused on him. So we already know from pressing the keys that what we need to surround those by is a forever control. That means forever, it keeps going back and checking. So here's those. It's going to check on stuff. As we go, I'm going to be adding things to this forever check. But right now, if I hit save, I save now, and I hit start, I can move Mr. Centaur around. Yay. And I'm going to make sure he can go everywhere in the cave and he doesn't get stopped. If you use smaller caves, then you're going to have to make sure he can move there. Nobody's going to want to play if they have to line it up so very perfect. There's Mr. Yep, he can go all over the cave. Yay, Mr. Centaur. So Mr. Centaur can go everywhere in the cave. We're happy for him. Yay. So let's add some stuff to make it more amusing for Mr. Centaur. So first of all, I'm going to add a dragon sprite. I'm going to go up here and search dragon. Hello, dragon. Not dragonfly. That's just not very terrifying. So there's the dragon. I'm actually going to go into this sprite and I'm going to go into his costume because I want him facing the other way. I want him looking the other way, and I want to do the fire one. So if I go into him right now, I can do this, and I can have him do whatever I need him to do. Oh, I'm on this. Sorry. Let's go to the regular thing. So I had to take it off the paint. So there's Mr. Dragon. I'm going to flip him horizontal so he looks the other way. That makes me pretty happy. And I can go back to code. I'm going to come over here and make him a lot smaller. Let's try it 20 and see how big he is. He pretty much covers up that cave. I'm going to make him a little smaller. Let's make him down to 15. I'm going to go back to my sprite, back to my costumes, because I want to do one other thing. One, we have this program so that it can't cross black. Well, Mr. Dragon is all green lines. He's no black lines. So what I'm going to do around this back area of Mr. Dragon is I'm actually going to paint some black lines. So I'm going to go up to paint. I'm going to change my fill all the way to black. And I'm going to paint all around the backside of Mr. Dragon. So now Mr. Dragon looks like the cave is closed. It's closed for business. Sorry, there'll be no campers here. I go back to code. So now my cave has a blockage. It looks like Mr. Dragon is blocking the cave and you can't get out. And it means that black will keep them from exiting. And it happens to be all part of the dragon. So that's great. He's got from here to here. Obviously, Mr. Centaur cannot take on a dragon. Let's be honest. So we need to give him a little help. So here's one of those added things we're going to do this time. We're going to create our very own sprite, but we're not going to draw it by hand. That sounds neat. I'm actually going to go to Google, and I'm going to use some of my Google tools, and I'm going to get tools, and I'm going to give Mr. Centaur a sprite. And, oh, it's got ping up there. That's not what I meant. So I'm going to give him a sword. Now I'm going to use my tools inside because I don't want a sword with a white background. I want a sword that has, what am I? Oh, sorry. I got to go images first. Images. I'm going to get a sword. I'm going to go color transparent. That means it should give me pings for backgrounds. Oh, I like that looking sword. And it looks like it's a ping. I'm going to right click and save my copy. So save image as, depending on how you're doing it. It does say unnamed ping. I'm going to change it to sword. And it's a PNG file. I need a PNG file. If not, it'll cause a problem. So over here, going to, now that I've got that, go into my sprites. There's one called upload a sprite. So I'm going to upload a sprite and I'm going to pick my sword. And I now have a pretty sword. I didn't make it. It doesn't belong to me, but it's pretty. So I'm going to definitely, that sword has to definitely get smaller. That'd be an awesome sword. It'd kill that dragon in a heartbeat. But I need it smaller, so I'm going to shrink my sword down. Let's try, everything else has been like 10. So there's 10. I'm going to stick my sword at the bottom of this cave. So there's my sword. I want my centaur to go get the sword, even though it looks like twice the size of him. It's just so you can see the sword. So there's my sword. It's at the bottom of the cave. I want you to go get it. So I need to do some I need to do some work. So let's go back to our events. And when the green button is pressed, I want to show the sword because I'm going to hide the sword when they pick it up. When Mr. Centaur gets it, the sword is going to disappear. So I'm going to show the sword. Then I'm going to make sure the sword always goes here at the start of the game. So I'm going to go to my motion and I'm going to put it, since it starts there, it's going to automatically put it there. And I'm going to create a variable called sword. Sorry, it's easier to go hit variables. I make a new variable. I'm going to call this one sword. So the variable sword, it does show up here. Honestly, I don't want it to show up there. So I'm going to uncheck it because I don't want to see that. When they get the sword, when the game starts, I want the sword variable to be 0. I'm going to use binary. So sword 0 means that the centaur doesn't have it. Sword 1 means he have it. So we've got the centaur. We want him to go get the sword. So let's go back to Mr. Centaur, and we're going to put an if block in for Mr. Centaur. So here's our if block. And we want to know when the centaur touches the sword. So go down to our sensing and said when touching the sword, then I want it to send a message called sword. So I go to my events, events, and I broadcast a message called sword. New message called sword. Now I'm going to stick that right above my ifs. So I've got a new if in there. I can stick it above, in the middle, anywhere, as long as they're all in line. So I'm making a if. Let's go back to sword. So when the sword receives the message, so when it receives the message sword, I want it to hide. So looks hide. And I want it to set sword to 1. So go down here to my variables, and I'm going to set sword to 1. Now that's important to 1. That's important because what I'm going to do is keep them from hurting the dragon without having that. So let's go to the dragon. First of all, when the game starts, we want to make sure the dragon starts in the right spot, and we want to make sure he's shown. Because if they've won the game, he disappears. So we're going to show him. We're going to make sure he starts at the right position, which is where he is now. Okay. Now, we're going to obviously make a message. So here is our centaur. He's going to send out another message, and that's when he touches the dragon. So we're going to put a control out there. If he's touching the dragon, so we'll go down here to our sensing. If touching the dragon, which is pretty scary, then we want to broadcast a message. That's how we're alerting. So we're going to broadcast the message called, new message called dragon. And we'll stick that in here along with the others. Make sure you don't get them inside each other. That causes all kinds of problems. So let's go back to the dragon. When the dragon receives the message. So we'll go down here. When they receive the message, dragon, we're actually going to have an if else, because if you ain't got a sword, the dragon's going to eat you. Actually, in this case, he's going to ignore you. So we're going to put a message up there saying, if else. We made a variable called sword. So we can check our variables. We're going to go into operators, and we made it equal 1 and 0. So if sword equals 1, we're going to go down to our equals box, and we're going to go down and get our variable. Our variable is sword. So if sword equals 1, then we can get rid of the dragon. We can hide him. No, we're not going violent here. So we can hide the dragon, and we're going to actually broadcast another message called freedom. Well, actually, we just broadcast a message saying you won. Where is it? Broadcast message right there. Or not broadcast, show. You have slain the dragon and escaped. Boom. And we're going to display that for a couple of seconds and then they'll move on. But if they don't have the sword, we want to say something else to him. So our dragon's going to mock them a little bit. I'm not hungry right now. Then I'm going to make another message saying, get back in your cave. So here it is. If I get the sword, I get the dragon. I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to make sure I save now. Let's check and make sure everything worked. So let's go. Here he goes. I'm going to try and take on the dragon without a sword. I'm not hungry right now. How rude. Back in your cave. Okay, if you insist. I got you fixed. I got a sword. Oh, I got the sword. It disappeared. My sword counter should say 1 right now. And freedom! Yay! Okay, so we need to do a couple things. Once he's free, we don't want him to be around. So we're actually going to, I'm not sure why it didn't do that. Oh, I know why it is. This is on the wrong spot. Let's go ahead and broadcast a message as we wanted to before. We're going to I'm always doing that one. We're going to broadcast the message, and this message is going to be called freedom. Freedom, freedom. Okay, so when freedom comes, we're going to do that. Sorry. So we're going to go back here, and I'm going to go look for freedom. So when I receive freedom, I can put it on the same one. It doesn't matter. When I receive freedom, I'm just going to put some message up there saying, I don't know why I deleted that, saying, you have slain the dragon and made your escape. Escape. So let's try our game. Okay, well, let's make that bigger so you can see him. Run. It's sword first, you know that. Just make him do clippity cloppities. It did not do what I needed it to do. That's very sad to me, but I know why. Because I put it in the wrong spot. Okay, this one here needs to go away from here. Actually, I'm going to put it on the centaur, which is where it should have been. And I'm going to go with the dragon and delete it off that guy. So on the centaur, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted the centaur to hide too. So I want the centaur to hide. You've made your escape and you're hidden. All right. That's my bad. So now I got a sword. I got a centaur. Pretty simple game. Now, I'm going to put a couple other things up here, and I want you to think about how you would program them. So one, when I started my game, if I started my game, I got a sword down here. I got another branching pot. I'm going to put a couple more sprites on here. One, a key. So I'm going to put a key up there. And I'm actually going to do a little magic on my key because it's pretty much the same color as my background. I'm going to go to my key. I'm going to click on my select, or and I'm going to select all, and I'm going to recolor them all black. And I'm done with that. So now my key, is there, need to definitely make it smaller. Let's shrink that down to about 25. There's my key. Roll that thing around. There, it looks more, I'm happier with it now. So there's my key. So I have a key. I'm going to put a rock in front of, and the reason I'm not doing, I could put a door there if I got crazy and wanted to do it, but it happens to have a rock and not a door. So I'm going to put a rock there. And I'm going to stick it right in front of that opening. But obviously, it's going to have to be shrunk. So I'm going to change the size. Let's start with 25. Oh, that's way too small. Now, the great thing about the rock is it's already made of black. I'm gonna rotate my rock around because I want it to be the same kind of following as the tunnel. So now it follows the tunnel. Let's give this a little bigger rock. The rock pretty much blocks off the tunnel. And what I would do is say, hey, you can't get to the sword, but you can see a small keyhole in the rock. And I make another variable called key, and I start out 0, and then I change it to 1. And if they have 1, then I make the rock go away, just like it did the dragon. So there's your challenge. Make yourself a working game. It does not have to be a dungeon. It can be a forest, but you do have to block people in. It can be a ton of things. You can be ants. And now that you know that you can create pretty much any sprite you want as long as it's a ping, that should not limit your imaginations. I'm looking forward to see what you got.